The Game Boy is one of my favorite systems of all time. It's a system that saw many variations, and even though I got my Game Boy Advance SP a few years after I had a DS at a flea market, I have fond memories playing it, and with games like Donkey Kong 94 and Super Mario Land 2, you can't go wrong. So you can probably tell when I found out about these, I was very excited. These are Nintendo Mini Classics. I made a video about them roughly 5 years ago, but there's a reason why I'm making another one you'll see in a bit. Or should I say, 8-bit. Oh, Demeech, you're bad. These are essentially mini Game Boy shaped keychains and are awesome. Let's take a look at how small these are. This is the Mini Classic compared to the original Game Boy. Mine's black, but it's exactly the same as the original DMG, just with a different color. As you can see, the Mini Classic isn't even half the size. It's a lot lighter and thinner, but for something this small, I would expect that. Now here's the Mini Classic compared to the Game Boy Color. Roughly half the size, but yet again, the Game Boy Color is a lot sleeker. And just for craps and giggles, here's the Mini Classic compared to the Game Boy Micro. It's slightly taller, but about 3/4 of the size. The history of the Nintendo Mini Classics is quite interesting. Essentially, Nintendo Mini Classics are reissues of Game & Watch games, but are mini Game Boy shaped keychains. There were also a few dual-screen games that look like flip phones, and there were even a few original games, like Yu-Gi-Oh!, Spider-Man, and the Smurfs. Yeah, I'm sure the Smurfs is a true classic. These were originally released in 1998, but have been redistributed over the years by a variety of different companies, with the latest release being as recent as 2014 by the Austrian company Stadelbauer. This company is mainly known for their line of slot cars Carrera, but are also known for being the main distributor of the Mini Classics. Other companies that have released them over the years are Mark & Spencer's, It's Outrageous, MGA Entertainment, and Toymax to name a few. That's why you'll see some of them in a variety of different colors despite being the same game. Here's the Super Mario Bros. One from 1998 compared to the 2014 re-release. As you can see, despite the colors being different, there are some subtle differences. For one, the Nintendo logo is on the bezel on the original, but not on the re-release. And you can't tell on camera, but the original feels much higher quality. I think it actually is because the batteries are still going. I put it in a few months ago, but I had to replace them in the re-release. But I think the sound is more accurate on the re-release. Here's what Super Mario Bros. On the Game & Watch sounds like. Here's what the original sounds like. And here's what the re-release sounds like. Other than those things, the games are identical. The thing about them, at least in North America, is I've never seen them in the most popular brick-and-mortar stores. I have always found them in the weirdest places. It could have been different before 2010, but I distinctly remember seeing the Super Mario Bros. And Donkey Kong Jr. ones at FYE back when I was in 4th or 5th grade, but my mom didn't let me get them. Thankfully, I was able to get a few back in 2014, out of Kmart out of all places, and GameStop for one of them. That one makes sense, but Kmart? God, I miss it. Let's take a look at the first wave of Mini Classics. These are by far the 3 most common ones out there. We got Super Mario Bros., Donkey Kong Jr., and Mario Cement Factory. These are the ones that were distributed the most, at least here in North America. All these right here are the 2014 re-releases. Now, as cool as they look, what's cooler is that they're actually fully playable. Like with the Game & Watches, there's one game on each of them. Let's take a look at Donkey Kong Jr. Based on the arcade game of the same name, you take control of Donkey Kong Jr. trying to rescue Donkey Kong from the evil clutches of Mario. This marks the only time Mario's a villain in a game, unless you count Donkey Kong Circus or something. The game is simple. Reach for the top while avoiding gators and birds. For as simple as it is, it's a really fun game that can get challenging, and considering this adaptation is using the same technology as a calculator, it really goes to show that even back then, Nintendo always pushed the limits of weaker hardware. Up next is Mario Cement Factory. You take control of Mario in a cement factory. The title explains it all. You dump cement into trucks, but watch out, if you fall down, you're toast. And don't even try to overfill the tanks either. Mario's Cement Factory isn't as good as Donkey Kong Jr., and the pace is slower even with Game B. but it's still pretty fun and can get challenging, but not quite as challenging as Donkey Kong Jr. Still, why base a game around a cement factory? Guess it fits Mario's character during those days. Finally, we have Super Mario Bros., based on a little game that, oh, I don't know, saved the video game industry. This one is a lot more hard to think of how it would work as an LCD game. Donkey Kong Jr. is pretty straightforward, but a side-scroller? Sounds crazy, right? You know what's crazier, though? That it actually plays great and is a lot of fun to play. The gameplay is different. Your main goal is jumping on platformers while avoiding pits to rescue Peach. But in later levels, there are a few enemies like Lakitus that throw hammers, bullet bills, and fire bars. For an LCD game, I'm pretty impressed what they were able to manage, and this remains my favorite Nintendo mini classic and even my favorite Game & Watch game. None of the Game & Watch Gallery games have it for some reason, so to be able to play it like this is a great option for those who don't want to spend the money on an original Game & Watch. And don't forget, these are technically still Game & Watches. You can set the time on them, and even set an alarm, so if you want to set an alarm for the latest Nintendo Direct in style, you could totally do that. But it's not going to be very useful if you're sleeping, since it's not that loud. I'd say only use the alarm if your oven doesn't have a timer or something like that. Remember during the beginning of the video how I said there was another reason I wanted to revisit the mini classics? That's because after I did some research, I found out that there were even more of them re-released in 2014. These are what I like to call the Mr. Game & Watch line. These are reissues of earlier Game & Watch titles, being Fire, Octopus, and Parachute. I actually had to import these ones from Europe, but I did look around at stores that I knew had mini classics, but had no luck finding them. So I called Stadelbauer, and as it turns out, they only sold the 3 I mentioned earlier in North America. At least mostly. I think they sold a few of them in North America, but I'm not entirely sure. When I called them though, all they had was Super Mario Bros., Donkey Kong Jr., and Mario Cement Factory. But let's be real, if you were a kid and saw Super Mario Bros. And Parachute on the same shelf, but could only get one, don't kid yourself, you get Super Mario Bros. So let's take a look at the Mr. Game & Watch wave of mini classics. First up is Fire. It's got a sweet transparent red case, and I'll admit, I'm a sucker for transparent devices. Please make transparent Joy-Cons, Nintendo. Please make transparent orange Joy-Con specifically. You take control of 2 firemen rescuing people jumping out of a burning building and leading them to safety. For such a simple game, it can get pretty challenging and addictive, especially when multiple people start jumping out of the building. That's the thing with these Game & Watch games, they're so simple but so much fun to play. LCD games can be really fun when done right, and so far, I've enjoyed everything I've played, and Fire is no exception. Up next is Octopus. Like with Fire, this comes in a transparent teal case, and while I like the red one more, this is still pretty cool. If only we could get a transparent orange one. The goal of Octopus is to collect treasure at the bottom of the sea, but watch out for the octopus because he will eat you. You can bring treasure back up for extra points, but you only get 3 points, so it's best to stay at the bottom and avoid the octopus tentacles. This isn't one of my favorite Game & Watch games, but fun still can be had. Finally, we have Parachute. Sadly, it's not transparent, but it does come in a pretty metallic blue color. Pretty nice. You take control of a guy steering a boat, trying to catch jumping people again? I'm noticing a theme here. This game is somewhat similar to Fire, but I found Parachute to be even more fun. You need quicker reflexes here because people can get stuck on the trees, and you have to have constant attention how fast they're falling. I think you can probably tell now I like the more fast-paced games. So that covers it for the Mr. Game & Watch wave of mini classics, but there is one more game I'd like to show. This is Carrera and is based on Stadelbauer's own slot cars. This is something right here that's way more popular in Europe than North America. The game itself is your typical racing game, and unfortunately, it doesn't play very well. I don't know what I'm doing wrong or if the unit's defective, but I can't change lanes sometimes, even though I press a direction on the D-pad. I'd say if you want a mini classic, this isn't the one. And just for kicks, I have decided to rank all the mini classics in order from my least favorite to favorite. Carrera is my least favorite, then followed by Octopus, Mario Cement Factory, Fire, Parachute, Donkey Kong Jr., and my favorite obviously being Super Mario Bros. I'm surprised it's such a good game, even with the limited technology. Now if you want a mini classic for yourself, most of them aren't that expensive. You can find most for around $10 to $12, with some of the rarer titles like Donkey Kong and Tetris going for a lot more. But most of these games are playable in the Game & Watch Gallery games on the Game Boy, except for Super Mario Bros., so if you're gonna buy one, I'd say Super Mario Bros. Is your best bet. It's the best Game & Watch game anyway, so go for it. But you know what would be cool? There's a line of toys nowadays similar to the mini classics called the World's Smallest, and they were able to create microscopic versions of arcade games like Pac-Man. The technology nowadays is there to make a tiny backlit color screen, and it would be so cool if Nintendo and them teamed up and released some mini classics again, but with full-on Game Boy games. Imagine being able to play Super Mario Land or Donkey Kong 94 on something as small as a mini classic. Even Pokemon would be amazing. I have no doubt they'd sell like hotcakes, so if you're listening, Nintendo, feel free to make my idea a reality. But what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments and keep calm and da-da on.